All right. Once again, Blake Gilson, ExxonMobil, thank you very much for your time. A little bit about ExxonMobil, a little company that has a bunch of other little companies that form this big complex of it. This is our main distribution. Unconventionals, we count our tank batteries in the hundreds, well pads in the thousands, deep water, LNG, conventionals, about 10 asset business units, 30 refining chemicals, 2 major pipeline networks in North America, 1 in the UK. The rest of our pipeline assets are more with joint ventures. About 60 to 70 terminals, part of our fuels business, 17 lubes operations, and then more research labs that I can count, and then some developing areas overall. So definitely have the experience of working with across the major ICS architectures, from very small, tiny PLC networks to very large-scale distributed SCADA environments that may look like more of a utilities-esque environment, hybrids or combinations of the two, and then our classic large-scale DCS environments and our global footprint. This particular talk wanted to go through some key aspects around scaling cybersecurity from a larger level. There's a lot of talk within the OT community about that one individual plant or facility architecture, and I'm sure as you walk around the trade floor, you can pick up a bunch of different great re-envisionment of the para model or a zone and conduit model that really talks about how you do security and segmentation at that asset level. But in the real world, we roll up one level, and this opens up a significant new area for risk mitigation strategies or risk divergent approaches for how things are playing. So this actually is an area that we need more research, more work, and more focus on to get to more like outcomes. When I say we, I'm more referring to the asset owner community. Look at all of this diagram, and I'll let you give you a second to digest it, and I assure you, all of us are seeing different things here. From how we've constructed these systems, what it actually means to us, and how your different groups interact overall. So I want to go through it a little bit and then talk about some challenges that we're seeing at scale as we try to take that original construct of how to design one secure site, and what do you do when you have 30 of them, when you have 60 of them, when you have 168, which is my count plus or minus of what we're working with. So at the very bottom, of course, I'm trying to show that little para-esque model, right, where that slight facility, the firewall on top, of course, is that enterprise process control environment, be the IDMZ. I think the previous talk, I heard that referred to as the internal DMZ. Maybe it's so funny, we call it the industrial DMZ, so all similar plays on it, and then some other demarcation of another firewall separating that process control unit out. So that's representative at the bottom, and then of course, we always have that one plant, that one facility, that one different architecture where you don't have that segmentation, and that one in this diagram is represented, the one on the far left, where you just have that, and you got your ICS there in the middle. Then you have your L4 environment, that enterprise network right in the center. There are traditional spaces that is transforming very, very rapidly in the IT space. Of course, the traditional connection to the internet, where you're internet-facing DMZ construction. Then we have the new clouds that are raining kind of on everyone's parade with the private cloud construct or that public cloud. The distinction being there is that the private would be almost an extension of your own data center. It's your construct of hosting and compute for enterprise-related services, but it's not necessarily public facing. It's a way to borrow someone else's data center spaces, direct connects, significant different ways to do it. Very, very different than that public cloud, which suggests a level of public presence on the internet and applications enter SaaS, CSS here. So big things that are changing within the space. The IT L4 enterprise is dissolving. It's going away. They're moving as rapidly as we can to lift and shift all of our compute resources to that private cloud to capture the benefits of the hyper-converged components. Of course, in an OT security conference, we're like, oh my gosh, the amount of risk. But the opportunities here from an enterprise reliability are significant. How well are you managing your data center, non-data center hosting organization? Well, we do a pretty good job at it, but that's not our core competency. How good are you at cleaning the filters behind your servers? Let's go up to your remote SCADA room. Do you think you have positive pressure to actually force, the dust buildup within that room appropriately to do it? No, you're exposing yourself to reliability reliability risks within that space, and you're claiming that you're more secure. No. The proper data center people that know how to run that can mitigate that appropriately, but you shift what the risk is within that overall component. So as the IT L4 enterprise dissolves, we'll have to re-envision how that particularly works and the cascading consequences of what that's going to have on OT security. We also have this push for certain applications to go to public cloud. Now, and of course, this became a really, really big topic of conversation about 15 years ago, plus or minus, when Google dropped a concept on the community called Beyond Corp, which said that what if we reimagine the corporate network where every application in your enterprise became Gmail, became internet facing, where your end clients who are participating on the same network and have a trust within your email server, but everything can go diverse and distributed, where I don't have to worry about what client or what application I'm interacting with. The security moves to identity-based components, and then all the apps can move in that way, and then the L4 enterprise can transform. That concept is still reverberating around our enterprise IT systems, but the ultimate consequences are that we are seeing a greater push for historization in the cloud, for SCADA in the cloud. And we're seeing industries, not particular in our space, starting to break that component down. We're seeing wind farms, electrical, solar farms, what else we have? Charging stations, all SCADA in the cloud. Understand it's not impacting the oil and gas business early on, but I think some of the first places that we're going to see that is in the SCADA components, but then also in terminal operations. Very, very different than your chemicals facilities overall. So the top part of this chart is just absolutely transforming, and this is going to continue to change over time. Now let's look down at the bottom. We continue to need work and research in how do we scale the security paramodel overall, and the areas that I'm seeing significant inconsistencies is authentication domains. Is that we have an IDMZ, another IDMZ, and another IDMZ. You can deduce that this is 3 DCS environments, but are those all one domain? One consistent DMZ across it? Or are they domains as participants of the ICS environment below them? Or are they their own standalone components that doesn't necessarily scale because every facility you have your own system? Or are they a part of the IT enterprise? Those particular questions, different asset owners answer those questions very differently, but know that we do need that separation between them. The second one is, how do we manage these systems? I use some of the someone mentioned it in the previous conversation, that SANS 400 level class is your go-to. What are the new crop of people being taught? And originally when that class was taught in 2016, they said that firewall that separates your enterprise and your IDMZ needs to face the more secure zone. Now, if you read that literature, it is way more wishy-washy. It's what does your IT team think? What does your enterprise security team think? How will enterprise IT ever trust the plant people to manage that system, to not introduce on the IT, because threats can move both ways? And we're seriously having conversations about having 2 back-to-back firewalls or a DMZ with nothing in it between that to prevent that particular attack scenario, that if you lose control of your enterprise authentication system, that risks don't immediately at a global scale impact all of that, those IDMZ environments or that ICS environment overall. We need more work on this to see if we can figure out what are the most appropriate solutions and mitigations. A couple things that we're considering internally and we're progressing toward, what I've also seen is that management of all of these red boxes, specifically on the L4 IDMZ areas, are moving to a sub-enclave within the IT enterprise network, where you carve out a section of higher protection and you put those security tools and capabilities there in L4, or the more leading people are putting that into that private cloud area. It's that specialty places to be able to provide a level of protection that would prevent you from being impacted by that generic IT enterprise compromise, and you have that layer of protection overall. Moving forward, the next generation firewall capabilities that are enabled is the ability to see and visualize that traffic overall at a greater extent. But being able to make sense of this data becomes that next challenge. If you're struggling on IT identity and access management overall in the enterprise systems, where you're having trouble tracking IT systems about what these databases or systems or applications are coming and going on the IT side, you will most definitely be struggling also in the process control environment. So how do you make sense of logs and threat detections that come out of the firewall to separate your process control from enterprises when you don't have your asset inventory be successful? We've looked at multiple attempts of getting the maximum value out of these logs, but if you don't know what you're looking at on both sides of those connections, you can struggle to be able to scale that threat detection capability. It was only at ExxonMobil we were able to make progress in that space when we created a dedicated cybersecurity team to focus on process control, with that first foundational moment being asset understanding and what's happening in that process control area, which is the turnkey lock to be able to exceed the value on being able to get the benefits of that threat detection overall. Then from this, we're looking at this capability to do more than just telling us when there's a problem, but be able to benefit from the passive network detection capabilities that are developing in firewalls to be able to answer what's happening at scale overall. These are historically stagnant environments, so nothing really changes that much over time, but when you scale it out this wide, there's always one of those things happening that's driving a different change. And because of our ability to move agilely, that a particular asset like the Baton Rouge refinery, if they have an application that's unique to them, we drive inconsistent policy creation because we will never stop that particular asset from capturing that benefit just because another asset like in Singapore won't need that capability. So we're always going to have inconsistent policies between that, just despite what the IT people would like to have. We need to be flexible enough to adapt and adjust to what particular asset sites are overall, and because of that, we're always going to be chasing asset discoverability between those particular connections. We need to be looking at this not only as an ability to just detect threats, but identify what are those main conduits that can become those threat vectors. There's two large general comments about how you should kind of start your cybersecurity program. About, I don't know, 5-ish, 6-ish, maybe even 10-ish years ago, they had the box of donuts approach. They said, go to every facility, find the person who knows that plant best that you can, bring him a box of donuts and say, what part of your facility would you get the most concerned about if it started smoking, right? What's that thing that scares you the most? And then you take that process and you do some type of cybersecurity HAZOP analysis. You back into the digital controls, what are the protections of that, and you build it up overall, and you can say, okay, this is the most critical piece from a safety process, and then what are those systems and what are the threat vectors that potentially can impact those systems? It's great, there's a lot of research, maybe even at this conference you'll hear a little bit, but how do we make that scale? How many box of donuts do I need to buy, and what do I do in Indonesia where there's no Krispy Kremes or Shipleys? Like the approach seems to be shifting where we're saying, no, if I theoretically ran 168 HAZOP analysis and I came to the same conclusions, what would those common controls be that I could implement across the board and move all my facilities at mass up to a higher security posture? And that's what we're trying to do here. We're looking for the particular set of controls that allows us to move beyond it, and this set of firewalls separating the process control is a key component for doing those multiple identifications, asset visibility, and threat detection and security overall. Of course, we want single panes of glass. We want scalability and management. A lot of the challenges and a lot have shifted, which have happened in the next generation firewall security places because legacy companies that had significant portion of this market share failed at product management, failed at being able to manage your devices at scale in a way that can make sense. And having conversations with some of those legacy vendors where, hey, your products are too difficult for our size sites to manage? And some of the answers back were, well, chemicals engineers shouldn't be managing firewalls. And we said, that's great. We'll find another firewall, right? So we need the multi-variability in configurations to be able to enable this and make it successful. We've had multiple experiments where we've taken next generation firewalls, given them to a facility engineer, and had them put them deep in the process control environment for whatever reason. Each one of those were ticking time bombs of disruptive capabilities, right? The next generation of capabilities requires a level of management and protection and consistency to ensure they remained licensed, to ensure they remain functioning, and ensure they need to be able to provide. So it necessitates a rising of skill set in certain situations as we deploy the next generation firewalls lower and deeper into the process control environment. There's going to be always those situations where you need the non-configurable, this is going to work, I don't need to worry about it, deep within the process network, but that next generation capability is continuing to need to go lower and lower and eventually be able to do that. But that comes with management, scalability, and construct to be able to manage it overall. Is the answer an enterprise management console that controls every red firewall on the screen? No. And it ought not be, right? We need to be able to differentiate and break down scale of management to provide that protective related component, but still be able to have those boundary devices strategically situated for maximum benefit. Then the next big wave on this, smart vulnerability management. I think me, as many of you got the email from CISA today, and sure enough, it was another just in January list of 200 critical vulnerabilities that you have to thumb through. And I was looking through, I was like, oh my goodness. Or I guess there were highs, right, using CVSS. This becomes a significant problem if we look at vulnerability management without context of the environment overall, without factoring in exposure management as a component of vulnerability management, where the CVSS score only makes sense in the context of what adversaries can do between those particular boundaries. So these particular boxes, the red ones, are the starting point for your conversation of how you deploy a good vulnerability management strategy. If you understand the threat vectors on how you manage and secure those risks, you now are able to focus laser on what particular systems you need to manage at what cadence. So your connectivity requirements of a particular controller deep within your ICS environment that has a remote code execution that's not exposed through any of those particular firewalls has a significant different cadence than that IDMZ server that happens to be still file sharing using SMB, right, across your boundaries. No, fix that, and then eventually we can come back and look at what strategic options we may have for turnarounds or patches to mitigate some of your vulnerability out there. But understanding this as a key foundational component is that next part of that journey overall. Okay, so what did we do? We talked about some of the challenges we're having about scaling the Para model in a multi-site environment. We talked about the challenges of authentication domains between how these systems are authenticated within them, just talked about different ways to manage that. Then we said the best way to get the threat detection out of these systems is coupled with an asset identification strategy, and then using data and data flows as a way of being able to get to that vulnerability, protecting these boundary devices, and then using that as the basis of the vulnerability management program. Hopefully that was slightly insightful. Wanted to hit on what we were thinking about and some of the areas we need to continue to make progress. Thank you for my talk.